So that's all my little bit at the moment. So we have a lovely young guest speaker tonight in Helen Wilmore, Dr. Helen Wilmore PhD. Okay, I'll just read Helen's CV that she provided to the club. Helen has been a member of the Gawler History team since its beginning in 2011, as well as an executive member of the Gawler Environment and Heritage Association for the last 15 years. An executive member of the Gawler Cultural Heritage Foundation since its formation in 2019, and for the past year a volunteer at the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre. Helen is keen to be involved in projects supporting Gawler's history, although her background and education are in science, and more particularly the field of human and embryonic genetics. Very good. She is the daughter of a school teacher and a nuclear physicist, that explains it, and with her three brothers grew up in a small village in Oxfordshire in England. Helen has always been interested in how the human body works. I'll let the naked the audience. And she gained a place at King's College at the University of London, studying an honours degree in physiology. After this, she completed a PhD at Bristol University in the United Kingdom, for which she investigated the genetic causes of cancers in newborn infants. The passion for genetics and fetal developments then took her as a postdoctoral fellow to various positions in Germany and the United Kingdom, and finally to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, where she worked for 6 years. In 2006, Helen and her husband Matt moved with their two boys to Gawler, and Helen stopped work and devoted her time to the family and various community projects. With the Gawler Environment and Heritage Association, she became involved in a project to digitise Gawler's historical council records, and more recently created a database of over 200 maps relating to many aspects of Gawler's history. These databases hold a wealth of information, and Helen has been able to use them to help the Gawler History team with queries from the public and with adding to entries on the website. Helen will now address us to talk about the two databases. So thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Oh yeah,
Paul.
that's good.
And thank you, Ian. So far it's all run smoothly with me getting here, thanks to those two. Thanks also to Brian, who asked me 3 years ago to come and do this talk, and I never thought it would come round, but it has. I am an English person, turned Australian, so I'm going to use the word database just because it comes more easily to me, so I hope you can forgive me for that. Also, as I'm English, I won't imagine you naked. So I'm going to talk about two different databases, the rates database first and then the map database. Wrong button. I can't do that without mentioning the Gawler Environment and Heritage Association. GEA was established in 1980, and at that point its focus was on the protection of buildings under demolition threat. It expanded to focus on other areas around the natural environment. So I became involved in producing two databases, and the reason for these is the origin and continuing focus of GEA on Gawler's heritage, protecting it, promoting it, enjoying it. So in 2006, quite a long time ago, I became involved in the rates database project. That had already been going for about 2 years, so I still feel that I'm a newbie to that project because quite a lot happened in those 2 years. It started because the Gawler Council and GEA recognised that buildings around Gawler were under threat from demolition, and it was difficult even for the planning staff of the council to recognise which buildings might be under threat, which might have some heritage that could be destroyed without having an archaeology investigation. So the council came together with GEA to try and partially solve this problem, and they came up with the idea of a database. to record historic information about land blocks and buildings on them. So what they came up with was the idea of establishing a database based on the rates records for the council, Town Gawler. And the idea was that this would be readily searchable. So at the moment, the rates books are handwritten and they're held at State Records in James Cross. To go and access them, you have to physically go there and look through manually. If you had a readily accessible database, it would be very easy. The information will be at your fingertips. And the idea is to make it public. So that's partly why I'm really happy to talk to you about this, because this is for everyone. It's not just for council or GEA. The idea is that everybody will use it. So what's useful about the rates books is that they contain the location, which is given as an acre number, which is what they used back in the 1800s. It has the name of the occupier and the owner, a description of the property, which could be something like a 2-room cottage or a hotel, corn store, foundry. Particularly in terms of residences, you can get a bit of an idea of how grand or humble a residence was. Some of them were described as pine cottages, or 1-room or a 2-room, and then you get some that are 6 or 12. They're often called a residence rather than a house or cottage. So you can tell something about the building, which in nowadays rates you can't. It also it has the rates value, and that gives you an idea also how grand the house is. The idea was to start in the 1800s and see how it goes and go up to the early 1900s. I meant to say at the beginning that, as Paul said, I'm not a historian at all. I've just sort of absorbed bits of information from people and being around people who know about history. So if anybody wants to ask questions or make comments, just shout out or put your hand up. I just love to hear from you. The next part of the goal was to try and link the data in the rates records to other sources, such as photographs, maps, cameo histories, newspaper articles. If you remember that this began in 2004, what you all know happened since then is that the Gawler history team sprung up, and this is exactly what they've done. Created a fantastic website with lots of information, images, stories in there, and that's great because we don't have to do it and we can work with you. We have been working with you and linking the data together. Oh, I think I knocked it. That's why I've written goalposts can move, and they're continually moving. So yeah, the idea now is to link into the Gawler history team, other groups such as the National Trust, and now it's the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre. So I really have to acknowledge a lot of other people. I feel I'm just sort of receiving all this and coordinating it at the moment, but there's been so many people involved in this. This is a photo taken back in 2009. I don't think Helen's here. Anne is here. So Helen and Anne were very much involved in this from the library side of this. We've got Bev Burke, Jeff New. When I joined, Jeff was coordinating this and getting volunteers and people together, and we were having meetings and lots of talk. And I was the data coordinator to try and manage the photocopies and the files, make sure that we've got them all in hand. So I've put lots of other names up here as well. At the moment, we have Margaret House and Bronwyn Earl, who are our volunteers. I might as well use this pointer I've been given. So what you see here is a pile of photocopies. So the rates books would come from State Records to the library, and then I think it was a mixture of librarians and volunteers photocopied them. And then volunteers take them away and manually transcribe all the information that's in there. So at the moment, as I said, we've got Margaret and Bronwyn doing that. We've had many other people in the past. Bev Burke, the National Trust were involved, so Bev and other people have checked the data, because some of it is not that easy to read, but if you know the names and the history, that helps. Yeah, we also had the Volunteer Resource Centre helping with volunteers, and we've received funding from GIHA, the Town of Gawler and the History Trust of South Australia. So these slides are what I'm using to try and explain the scope of what we're doing and how goalposts can move. And this is a long-term project because it's quite labour-intensive in terms of transcribing. So in 1839, Gawler was officially born, and the town blocks were laid out after the land was surveyed. And each of those blocks, originally there were about 200, they were called acres. Then in 1854, many councils were formed, and Gawler was part of the Barossa West District Council. When I say Gawler, I mean this old Gawler town area. And then in 1857, I've heard various bits of language describing this: local agitation, dissatisfaction. The people of Gawler were not happy being governed by the Barossa, which was, the offices were in Lyndoch, and so their agitation led to their own council being formed. And that had the old Gawler town area, which was bounded by the rivers, and then it was Gawler East up to East Terrace. So this is important because if you're getting the rates records, you want to make sure you're getting the areas you want and not overstretching yourself. So at the moment, what we've got are rates records from 1858, which were the first ones held by the Gawler Council. If we wanted the earlier ones, we'd have to not go to State Records at Jeffers Cross. I think they're still held at Barossa. Of course, this misses out a lot of current Gawler and old Gawler. It misses out Gawler South. Gawler South was originally in the District Council of Munapara West. From 1899, it had its own council with Gawler West. And then in 1933, there was an amalgamation. So Gawler South, Gawler West, Evanston, Williston, and Gawler East up to Cheek Avenue were included. Yeah.
Where does Bassett Town fit into all that?
I don't want to get it wrong. Is it Gawler South or is it Gawler? Yeah. So it's to the west of Gawler South, around where the railway station is.
Where the station?
What about the other side of the railway station?
18th Street through to the racecourse.
So that would be in the Gawler South rates records, and I don't know where they're kept. At the moment, we're not in a position to go hunting for more because there's just 2 volunteers transcribing and a lot of work. Yeah, so even if that was possible at some point, which would be great, matter of going to different council records and finding the old rates books. So this is where we're at so far. 26 years worth of books have been photocopied, and that was the original lot of photocopying that was done, and the idea was to get a taste of what there was. So they span 1858 to 1892 with gaps. And now, very much thanks to Margaret and Bronwyn in the last 5 years or so, we've got 21 years worth in the database. They've done about a third of those. Terry Flower, I really should mention him. He also did 7 or 8 years worth, and then there were a number of other volunteers that have done the rest. And to put that into some perspective, there are 449 town blocks in that council area. So every year there will be around 400 entries. And this is the area we're talking about, and it's split up into 3 wards. So, yes. This is one of the photocopies of the rates books, and it's organised by the wards. So you can have a look at that if you want. I'll leave it over here. Oh, also, told me not to walk off. I did. I'm hoping at the end, if you've got time, you will have a look at what we've got displayed here. It's for you to have a look at. Include most of it is maps. There's the rates book, but the most of it is maps. And also Martin Walker has very kindly brought in some original cloth maps. One standing up there and some others under some glass cases. So if you want to have a look at those, that's great. So to give a snapshot of what was going on in Gawler. This is looking at 1858, which is the first rates records, to 1890, which is the last one that we've got transcribed at the moment. So you can do research like I did here to go through and find out how many dwellings were there, how did it change from one time period to another. So the dwellings went up, shops went up. It's quite a lot of shops for the 1800s, I think, as a non-historian. Banks went from 1 to 3. Mills, 3 mills in the 1890. 2 candle factories. And then I guess candles went out of fashion. Smoking house. I was curious about that when I saw it. I wonder whether it was for smoking meat. That's the only thing I managed to find out. So I looked briefly at the breweries. So what I found was the one that was present in 1858 and also in 1890 is the Fotheringham Brewery on Julian Terrace, where the Steinborn Holden site is. So this is what the rates records show us in red. You get the street and the site. It was owned or occupied by James and Alexander Fotheringham and then Thomas Fotheringham, and it has a rates value of £150, which is very significant. A house might be between 3 and 20 for a largish house. So I'll read out what I found on the site. Thomas Fotheringham built the Gawler Brewery on what is now Julian Terrace facing the South Power River. The beer produced was very popular locally and was even reputed to have medicinal properties. The SA Brewery took over the Gawler Brewery in 1832, and the building never reverted to producing solely cordials aerated waters, and refreshing summer drinks. So also from the rates records you get that land had a brewery, malt house, outbuildings, yards, stabling and cottage. And this is from a government register of breweries, which has a lot of description, and it has the same information. Malt store yards, outbuildings, stable with stalls for 10 horses, storerooms, office, etc. Does that mean making records? The other brewery, on the other hand, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of information about. It was only around for a few years. It was on land owned by John Old and occupied by Thomas, and John Old died in 1860. It has a rates value of £60, which shows you that it's quite a lot smaller than the Fotheringham Brewery. And then, when you look at when you get the rates records, you get an acre, and you have to somehow apply that to today's land. And the way of doing that is to get an old map, which shows the acres. So what I've done here is compared an 1800s map to, this is actually Bing and not Google, because somehow Google's street maps are just not working for me. I don't know why. But we see that acre 205 is where Cafe Nova is now. So that was a brewery for a few years. Also, in the rates records, you might find buildings and institutions that didn't pay rates. So that's why I'm saying they're not reliably recorded. Schools, churches, chapels, telegraph office, any kind of civic building owned by the council. They may or may not appear. And if you look through the rates records, you get a real feel for how they were used. They were used for collecting money. They weren't there as a record. So sometimes, often you will get names that are misspelled, and you might get a house that's not in there for 1 year, even though it appears in the next year. And then you might find some of these buildings, schools, town hall and so on, but you might not. So you have to take them as they are. They are a historical document rather than a record of exactly what was there. This is me trying to do a bit of a promotion to show you what the rates books look like, because if any of you would like to get on board and help transcribe them, it would be fantastic. The more people we have, the more quickly this information can be in there. Margaret, do you have any idea off the top of your head how long it takes to transcribe a year or a ward?
Look, if you said you could do it in a week, one, but I
Terry used to say
I
8
can't do
hours, and I'm not sure whether that was one book or the year's book. But you can't sit for that many hours.
You can't, and it just depends on the script.
Yes.
Whether the cursive is easily to read, it's not faded, and you have to start playing a guessing game. And that also, the more you do, the more you get used to the names. And once you get used to the names, you can work much faster.
Yes, absolutely, spot on.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought I'd show you probably one of the worst books. 1858. It's like they were getting into the swing of it. They hadn't done these books before. There were crossings out. Lots of things were written in pencil, and particularly when you have the photocopies, when that's been photocopied and sometimes photocopied again, it's very difficult to see. So this is a photograph of an original. So what I'm doing now is going back to all the pages that we were missing things and photographing them and correcting them. I'm making that sound like a lot of work, but I think all of that is out of the way, and we're now going on to nicer ones. This is, like Margaret says,
It's good script.
yes, but yeah, you still have to get used to it a bit. You know, some of the capital letters, you might not initially know what they are, but if you look through for another name that you recognise, you'll work out what the capital letters are.
Quite often a capital letter, a downstroke's fine. It might have a faded upstrokes, which makes it more difficult to read as well.
Yeah, particularly in the photocopies, and we've only got maybe 5 years of those left, and I think what we're going to do now is go to photographs. So I'm going to photograph the whole book and put that into one document and see what the printing of that is like, and I think that'll help a lot. And now we can do that. We've got digital photography. This is the second page. So each book has 2 pages. First is the owner, occupier, description, sorry, not the description, the area that it's in, the land, and this has a description. And also a lot of numbers, which are to do with different rates. There's police rate and lighting rate and things like that. We were transcribing those initially, but we've decided not to now because it's people's precious time. But we are transcribing the rates value because that gives you good information. This is what it looks like in Excel files. There was a reason for the colour, which was something that Andrew Paisley set up because he had it linked. He created a database that would make this searchable, so all of this would go into that, and wherever you had purple, it had to be numbers only, and the green could be text and numbers. So it was kind of a reminder for people that that's what they needed to do. And this is the database that he set up, but it never really got working because it needed a dedicated website and it was very complicated. It also didn't have, for example, if you'd looked for a name and pulled out all the entries with that name, but then you maybe only wanted to look at a particular acre with that name, it couldn't do that. So at the moment, this part of it is not finished, it's not usable at the moment. We're thinking about GIHA setting up its own website and putting this on there simply in the form of spreadsheets that people can search. I mean, that's in Excel where you can just pull out a name and it gives you all the entries with that name. So what could it be used for? Well, the idea is that anybody's going to be able to use it. It's public, it's free, it could be used for researching properties or families. You could look at individuals or companies and do social history or industrial research. And of course, the original plan for this was to identify buildings that might be under demolition threat and to find out who lived there, what was the building there, what was it used for, does it need protection? So here are some examples of uses. I can't take any credit for this. This was from a poster that somebody else produced. I'm not sure, it might have been Kathy Brown. So she looked at the Fotheringham family So you could go through the database, pick out all the entries that have the following ones, and then she's put it into a table where you can see properties where they owned or lived there. Another one, which is properties owned by James Martin, who's the owner of the Phoenix Foundry, but I don't know whether any of you can see that, but he owned a lot of different properties around the town. So the next few are searches that the Gawler history team asked. Well, they would have community members contacting them, and then Brian would ask me whether I had anything that could help them. And I would say half the time I could find something, the other half of the time it would be somewhere in Gawler South or Williston, or it would be in the 1900s, which is then very frustrating because we don't yet have any of that. And even if I did find something, you've then got to have some interpretation of what it means, and that often involves linking it into information on the Gawler History Team website, or looking for certificates of title to try and make sense of it. But that's all quite exciting, I think. It's all part of the finding out of things. So this is just to show Jim Marver contacted Brian, and this is what I was able to send him, any entry for the name Marver, which is what he wanted to know, and he seemed quite happy that that fitted with what he knew, and he gave him information of who was there and where they lived. I think I've accidentally deleted the slide before this, but it doesn't matter. The slide before this didn't have the red or the bit on the left, and it had somebody called Swan who was wanting to know about Gregory Swan and Company, which was his family. So looking for Gregory and Swan with different spellings. So that's another thing. It's good to look out for different spellings, because even though you know the spelling, the clerk that was doing it in the 1800s might have got it wrong, or it might keep changing. And this showed the machine shop, yards, and so on that were owned by Swan Gregory and then Swan and Ivitt, which matches this information, which is from the Gawler History Team website. This is one that Brian wanted to know about. Dr. Popham in Cradley on High Street. So this is taking out what was in that big Excel spreadsheet with all the colour. So you take it out, and then you can look at it and work out what you actually want. And analysing that showed the house in 1858 was unfinished. In 1860, there were 2 unfinished houses, each had 6 rooms. In 1861, it was a 12-room residence, value of £50. So that's very significant, as we know. It fits with Cradley. 1868, it also had stabling, offices, cultivated land, and a large garden. Rates value of £85. Another one Brian asked about. He was asked to open a new business starting up at 1 Walker Place on the corner of Julian Terrace, and he believes it is the old James Martin premises. I would appreciate great notice, stuff, and whatever you have, please. Regards, Brian. So from all of this information, it showed there was a corn and flour store. Next door was the telegraph office, showrooms, workshop and yards, also owned by James Martin. It was later replaced by a malt house, probably to do with the brewery, and then it became part of a complex of offices, yards and workshops. So I'm hoping that that added to the knowledge that he had already. This is the one I'm most excited about, and sad to hear that Diane and David Castlebone aren't here tonight, but it's also kind of good in a way because I'm a bit embarrassed that I started looking at this 2 years ago and I still haven't finished it or got back to them. But this is very interesting house and story. So David and Diane bought the house at 13 Finnis Street, which is it's the upper end of Reed Street, between Finnis and Wall Street, up the hill from Foodland. It's very prominent and striking, and I think this was soon after they bought it. They put the fence in, but the garden is now landscaped and they've done a lot of work on the house here. So what they told me was that we know William Dawkins resided here circa 1930 and that he was a former mayor of Gawler. It appears the house was built by someone reasonably affluent, as it has 2 levels with servants' quarters out the back. Also has various slate and marble fireplaces, high ceilings with ornate roses and cornice work. This is a photo from the Gawler History Team website showing the Dawkins family when they lived there. So I found a bit of information. This in paper is what's in our database at the moment with the years that we have. But I went to state records and went through the books looking for acre 99 in each book, up to, I think I went up to about 1914, and I also looked at the certificates of title for them. So from that, we're able to find out when the building, when the house was first built in 1872. It was under construction by Benjamin Edward Deland, who was a builder. He bought it and he lived in it, and later he was called an architect. That was something they wanted to know, when the house was built. I think in the estate agent adverts it was put as a lot later than that. Completed in 1873. In 1882 it was under the control of the executors of James Dawson's will. He died in 1882, but there's no record of it passing to him. This is something I don't really understand. It's almost like he bought it and then died, and there's no record of him buying it. I don't know whether he lived there.
No, he was up in Gawler East. He had property up there now. I'm not sure of the name.
So perhaps he bought it but didn't move there. And then the executors then sold it to John Charles Wilkinson. He was probably the most prominent auctioneer, and I know that from looking at maps. His name comes up quite a lot. Then it was occupied by Dr. Maher, but still owned by Charles Wilkinson, and then William Dawkins from 1897 to 1935. In 1914, there was a large increase in the rateable value, which suggests he might have extended the house. And that's what I found quite amazing. They knew that William Dawkins had been there, but also 3 others, or 2, and I'm not sure about James Dawson's, whether he lived there or not, but there were a number of people there who were not mayor when they lived in the house, but they were mayor at some other time. So now I'm moving on to the maps, and I thought I'd just say a little bit about why I, with the Gawler Environment and Heritage Association, created a database of maps, and it started with the rates database back in 2006. Because when I was working on that, I realised that we needed maps that showed us where the acres were and what the acre numbers were. And I had some. I had photocopies that I'd inherited, but I didn't know where they'd come from. I wondered where the originals were. How could I get a better copy? Some of them were all fuzzy. Some of them people had coloured in and used for other things. And I made a table with about 10, and it's all question marks, unknown. I went to state records and just searched for maps of Gawler and found these three. So there's this one, which was to do with the railway to Angaston, and that one is really very good for looking at the acre numbers. This one is the Warren map of 1863, which I know 3 other copies which are at the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre, and they're all in some state of disrepair or damage. They do have one reasonably good one there, but it's missing the title here, which this one has. And as you can see, this looks like coffee or something has been scooped over it. They also had one of Gawler South with the subdivisions there. So this just got my interest. At that time, I was able to get photocopies of these, but there was no scanning going on. This shows an enlargement of the centre part where you can see the acres and acre numbers. The other reason is, like most people, I think, maps kind of draw you in. You wonder what's on them. They're visual. They give an image, and they make you think of your life. What's there? What do you recognise? You might recognise these two. I didn't take their names, but this was in April in this room. Adrian Shackley was giving a talk, and he brought aerial photographs, and people were very interested in them. I've put a quote here which was about a major exhibition in London about maps of Australia, and I like what this person writing about the exhibition said, which is the maps which seemed to attract the most attention and discussion were those in which people could see themselves, or at least their part of the world. So it's probably a cliche, but I started doing this in lockdown last year. I just thought, I've got this table of about 10 maps. I might just try and expand it a bit. I might just find out where they are. I might find 20. Who knows what I'll find? I'll just Google things, see what comes up. I found quite a few maps on the Gawler History Team website, which opened up more questions. You know, I had nice images, but where did these come from? And I just started really enjoying it. And, you know, whenever I had a bit of spare time, I'd be cooking dinner, I'd sit down and I'd start Googling more maps. And it grew. And it's now 200 maps. Well, the criterion was, does it relate to Gawler's history? So some of them are Australia-wide, some are South Australia, most are more local to Gawler. So this is what the database looks like. It's a PDF document and it's on the History Team website. Anybody can go there, access it, use it, you can download it. This is just the front page. These are what some of the pages look like. And then within that, for every map, we have the title of the map, who created it, the date the map was made. Sometimes the map was made later, but it uses an earlier map, so it might have both dates. This was most important to me, the location and accession number, because I think it's really important that we acknowledge where these maps come from, partly because it's the right thing to do, but also so that other people can use them. If you know what this map is that you're using, someone else can see it and they can access it as well. I've also put in hyperlinks. So in a lot of cases, these maps are available online, and from the database you can go to the website. So as I said, I started off with just one criterion, and then my other criteria started changing. I was going to go to about 1910 and then stop, but I actually started getting more interested in maps that were, in the Second World War and the First World War. In fact, thought they're quite interesting. It's not just the original hand-drawn 1800s maps or printed 1800s maps. We also have modern maps that show something in our history. I really had to put this in because there's so few showing Indigenous Australia. You talk about a map, we're really talking about colonisation and beyond that, but there is so much history before that that needs to be acknowledged. And also maps that are in brochures. This is one for a walking tour. And aerial photographs. The subjects are very diverse. Indigenous culture and language, rainfall geology and native vegetation. So this map here shows rainfall levels. The 1839 survey and town plan. So the original town plan is in the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre, the one by Colonel William Light. There are a lot with cadastral boundaries. I suppose governments wanted lots of maps to be produced with the boundaries. Settlement and growth of the town, world wars and military planning, topology and storm drainage, cemeteries, parklands, recreation areas, and it goes on. Very, local small things happening, road closures, historical stone walls. And I've simply put this up just to show the breadth of where the maps come from. So you've got council, library and archive facilities, state and national authorities such as State Library, National Library. Also community databases and websites. And studies prepared for the town of Gawler, articles and books, and Wikipedia pages. I didn't set these as where I was going to look, it's just where I found them. So if I find one somewhere else, that goes in as well. So how does it work? It works best on a computer. You could print it and you could use it, and if you went to the State Library, you would have accession numbers and you could find the maps. But if you're on a computer, you can get a lot more information and you can get maps very quickly if they're on there. So this is part of what the database looks like for 3 maps. You have the title, the year and who created it. Then you have its location and any kind of accession or identification number. And then a description with just a thumbnail image, just something to identify that map or so that you can see what it is, but it's not the map. If you took that, it would be very low resolution. Because the idea is that you will find the information and the proper map where it comes from. This is the really exciting thing, which I blame Adrian Shackley for. I don't think he's here. But he just said in a GU meeting, and I think he smirked, you should put in links to the website. And I went away and I did it. So these blue icons here, if you click on that, you get taken to the website. If it's this, which vaguely looks like a map, you'll get an image, you'll get a digital image of the map. If it's an information sign, it means you won't get the map there, you'll only get information. So here's an example. Freerston's plan of Gawler town and its suburban townships, possibly from 1878. This is what the entry looks like. Two versions available. If you click on the eye, you'll get taken to the State Library website and you'll have their information. You will see that there's no image directly available from there, but you can purchase the map. So Giha purchased quite a few maps as part of this project. It's purchased some maps and it's also paid for the State Records and State Library to digitise maps, and that once that's happened, they're far more accessible to people. So if they weren't there before, they might be there now. Also, this is now free for us to distribute. So if anybody wants maps that Giha has paid for, it's free. Just ask me. You can have copies of them. So then, if you use this icon, you go to the Gawler History Team website and there's a black and white image, possibly of a photocopy. Another example, this is called Gawler Corporation. It's a small map, just a little a jotting of some new streets to be changed. This is the top of Murray Street. It's the road going off to Williston. It didn't used to be there. Murray Street used to carry on what is now Murray Road. So this was when they planned that road change. And I've seen in the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre, they have a sketchily drawn one, which was taken to a council meeting and adopted. And then this one appeared a few months later, as if the government is finalising it. So this one, you can see State Library allows you to have an image of it. So it takes you to the website where you get information and you can download the map. This is one that Adrian Shackley produced. He's an absolute legend at so many things, but particularly native vegetation. He really knows his stuff. So he has mapped the vegetation around the town of Gawler and the larger region. And his map is available on the Gawler Environment Centre website. It's there so that people can choose the right plants for where they live. This is one that Helen Hennessy produced. She's been researching and writing a book on EHQ, and some time ago she created this walking tour, which is a brochure that's produced by the library. Not sure. Town of Gawler. So what I've shown that's just the map within the brochure. So you can go to the website. There's 4 different brochures with walking tours. The brochure has information, so as you walk around, you can read about what you're looking at. So this database led into an exhibition of maps, which occurred in May this year in conjunction with the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre. And this is some of the people at the launch looking around at the maps. And I just wanted to read out another quote, which is, "The maps seem to make viewers slow down and perhaps travel a little way with the map maker. Beyond aspects of cartography and history, and into the realm of the imagination. And so the next few slides are me journeying into Gawler's history. I'm just going to show a few of the maps that I just loved for one reason or another. Remembering that I'm not a historian, it's just I like discovering things. So this one, which I have a copy lying here, very long. I won't go over there again. There's a copy of this in the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre, and I've been volunteering there to catalogue their maps for them. And this was poured out, and Adrian Brown was there as well. He's cataloguing photographs of portraits of people, I think. And he came over, and Petra Brown and Jacinta Weiss were there, and we're all poring over this map. It's absolutely fascinating. It's Murray Street in 1886, and it's very detailed. It's drawn by an artist. It has every shop on it, what the shop was, and who owned the shop. It's got little pictures of trees and so on. So if you have a chance afterwards, come and have a look at the life-size copy that we've had printed. I'm smiling at Ian. This is one that he created, and I'm quite annoyed that I missed it. It didn't make it into the database, but the database will inevitably be updated at some point because there'll be maps out there. I'm hoping that you or people you know might have a map that I've not seen, I don't know about, or a bit of a map or anything, because I know they're out there and we need to put them in for an updated version. So Ian created this, and this makes me think of the rates database and why I started looking at maps, which was where we need to overlay an old map onto current Gawler so that people can see where it was that they lived. I've sort of tried to show this in case Ian's video didn't work, but do you want to show your video? So this is that same Murray Street map with all the shops and so on it from 1886, and then last year Ian overlaid that in a video on a current aerial photograph. Take. That is on, I'm not sure what the website is, the Gawler History Facebook site. So just in the last year I found a few others where people have started doing this. So this is by Rick Bailey. He's taken the 1878 Frierson's map and overlaid that onto photographic imagery of the town. If you go to the website, you'll get more than you get here. You can zoom in and out. It's not a video like Ian's, and you can't alter how opaque it is, but it's pretty clever, I think. And I spoke to Rick, and he has a background in maps and surveying and that kind of thing. And he used exciting words like geolocation and rubberizing. So he said what you do is you geolocate, which is where you take known points on your tube. You take your known point of one map and you lock it in to the other map, and then you rubberize, because those two maps are not going to overlap properly. So rubberizing allows it to wobble. And yeah, I think that's fantastic, because years ago I've been wondering how could anybody do this, and they do it now. You can even take maps that are in the collection of the National Library of Australia. They now have a website, which I think was just set up this year. You can take their maps and put them onto current views, and they're encouraging people to do that. You can register and go in there and do that. So, just a few other things that I found quite exciting when I was looking through this old map of Gawler. This was one I found at State Records recently, well, last year. Their search system is very difficult to use, which is another reason why I thought creating a database is a really good idea. Because trawling through it, often you have to trawl through it. If you use keywords, use Gawler and map, they don't come up. So I spent many, many hours just going through lists, and I had the staff there also helping. They found the three that I showed earlier are now not public anymore. They're owned by Revenue SA, and they've been just put in a whole lot of maps that you can't access. But I have a phone number, and I'm going to try and see whether we can get them scanned and made public. But I did find this one showing the council area. But what I found exciting was this blue line that runs from the Northern Market down to the train station in Bassettown. I'm wondering what that was. Eventually I worked out it was the Tram Line. There's no key on the map. So I started reading about the Tram Line, which is something I'd heard of, but I couldn't imagine it. There's a lot of information out there, but I'd never looked. But this just started me looking there and come up with pictures like this, and you wonder how that got past health and safety. I don't think it would nowadays. I wasn't going to include initially the era of First and Second World Wars, but then I started finding maps and information and thought, well, it's actually quite interesting, and it's things that I don't know, and I'm finding out about. So this map here, Martin Walker's very kindly brought in a cloth version under glass there for everyone to look at, which is more colourful. It looks far more stunning than this. It's a survey area from 1935, survey map. Here's another one, the Gawler manoeuvre area. This was a cloth map given out to trainee soldiers or civilians who were also training in military manoeuvres. So they often had camps in the wartime on the Gawler Oval, and the trainees went there and they were given this map, and if you can have a look at it, it has a little details like hillocks and little descriptions of like a pear hedge, things that, you know, if you're actually on the ground you might see. I think I'm getting to the end now. I have to mention... Oh yes, please.
Did you find anything on the life horse activities down at the race course?
Is that a brigade or something? You have to...
that was after the First World War, before the Second World War. I've got documents at home that I've just found in the last couple of weeks. The original registration my father filled out.
Most of what I got for that is from this website that somebody's put together, which has bunyip clippings. So it could have been mentioned in there. I found what I could to do with a map that interested me, but I probably saw that as well. So I mentioned earlier that I'm volunteering at the Gawler Cultural Heritage Centre, and this came about because I contacted them and said, can I have a look at all of your maps? and Petra Brown told me she nearly had a heart attack. She thought maybe I was just doing a personal research study, and she thought, how are we going to do this? And then she realised what I wanted, and she and Jacinta Weiss was so welcoming and helpful and signed me up. They just, well, didn't take much persuading when they said, while you're doing this for your database, could you also catalogue them for us? Because I think they've got thousands of items in the collection, and they need cataloguing and they need volunteers to do that. And I just thought that was just an amazing opportunity, to be able to look at these maps firsthand. It's just been a real pleasure to do that, and it made a lot of sense doing the two at the same time. And so what I've listed here is the breadth of maps that they have. Some of them are similar to maps at the State Library, but others are different. We have the original plan of Gawler, which apparently was found in a waste bin. Somebody just thrown it away. Doesn't look much until you really look closely and see what the map is. Various maps of the town, the blocks early on. There is this map, which can't be shown for privacy reasons, approximately 1960, where the name of the owner is written on every single allotment. Urban conservation townscape map, which was to do with heritage protection, parklands, recreation areas, cemetery, lots of subdivision maps, which show the new areas that were coming up. And I've got lots, well, they're not from the centre, but I've got lots of subdivision maps over there. So a lot of it is more local than you would find somewhere else. And then they have more modern maps, aerial photographs, the 1985 council boundary changes, World War I and II sewerage scheme, which you may not find that interesting. I learned what an Imhoff tank is for receiving all the sewage. But even if when you look at these maps, you also see things like contours and streets and what blocks were around at the time. Maps on the RAF station. The World 3-Day Event Horse Championship. Petra brought that out. It was a kind of funny blue colour, a bit like carbon paper. I thought this is very odd. I'm not that interested in it, but I photographed it and I took it home and I thought, oh, this is really good. It shows all the stands. It has the royal box. It shows that there was catering at the silver level, but then catering at the gold level. So those people, whether you paid more money, you got better catering in a different area. And Petra told me that just that day before, she'd had a cartographer come in telling her what dye line was, which was what this blue map was. So I went away and I'm reading all about dye line and all the different chemicals, and it turns out, through the years, so many different chemicals and methods of processing and reproducing maps have occurred, and a lot of them, like that one, are open to chemical degradation, so you've got to look after them properly. I've written down here architectural plans. They have quite a lot in the centre, and I decided not to do those at the moment, but I would like to do them at some point. Yes, so all of their plans, all of their documents and photographs of items are going into an eHive site on the website. I just wanted to mention that in case if people didn't know, because I didn't know. And they've already got about I think I've put 35 maps in there, and they've put 6 live to the public. But keep an eye on that website because things will appear in there. I finished preparing this talk at about 6:30 and I didn't have time to scan this. It's a Rotary Club map with dark arrows going around it. And I don't know what it is. I would like to know if anyone knows what the purpose of it was. So I'll leave it over there. But it's also a reminder to me to say, I hope you enjoy using the database, but if you know of any maps or have any information, I'd love to hear from you. There's a couple of brochures, one about the maps database and one about the rates one. So take those. If you do want to contact me in the future, you can ask Paul or look on the website to find my details. So I've got this is particularly thank you for the map database, which is the Gawler Environment and Heritage Association, which supported this all the way, laughed with me through lockdown, supported the idea, but also supported financially with the exhibition. And I haven't brought we've got some big prints of maps because I just got it into my head they had to be life size, they had to be the size of the original map, and one of them is huge. So all of that was paid for by GEAR. Jacinta and Petra, who have been fantastic at the centre. State Records of South Australia and the staff there for helping to find and scan maps. State Library of South Australia, they prioritise things when I said I've got this exhibition and they scan things for me. And the Gawler History team. I went to a couple of meetings at Brian's place and just thought what a great bunch of skillful and dedicated people, and really enjoyed it, and they welcomed what I was doing. They were happy to put it on their website. And of course, all the people who created the maps, and all of you for listening. And thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, happy to. I have to say, I'm sure there's lots of people here who know about history, so I'll field questions, but if I need to, I'll just field them back again.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you take a point in time, say 1945, street numbers change, house numbers and streets change, street names change, certificates of title change. But say, for instance, you know what your house number was, and what your street was in 1945, and the certificate of title reference numbers at that point in time. How do you go from there to looking in a rates book and
very
confidently knowing that you were looking at the correct entry for the property of interest?
Sometimes you can be confident, sometimes you can't. So those what you get is an acre number,
And where do you get the acre number from? From the town map?
Oh, okay. So if you've got the rates books,
Yes.
you've got an acre number.
Uh-huh.
If you're working from your street number, you've got to try and get that acre. You've got to put the two together. But I was going to say that the acre is about half an acre in size. So now, commonly, those might have 4 houses on them.
Yes.
If you're lucky, they don't. But what I've done with a lot of these is I've either gone there or I've gone on Google Maps. If you can see that there is one old 1800s house and the other 3 are modern,
Yes.
you could. It is a matter of research and investigation.
Yeah. So you've really got to look at how many houses were on that street at that point in time, and then use other clues within the entries. I mean, obviously, if you know who owned and lived in it.
If you can certificates of title, I mean, now that you can get those online, that will help. That will give you the name, and the name will be on the rates book.
The lot number hasn't changed since the original survey. So your actual lot number, don't worry about your street number. You need to know the lot number.
Yeah, but he's saying he lives there, he has a street number.
Yes.
How does he find that lot number?
Yes.
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 The original
Yeah.
lot numbers would have been much larger and gradually over time have been subdivided.
Yes.
So it would have been 20th Street and that's one such.
Yeah, but if you look at your certificate of
Yeah.
title, it will still have that lot number.
Yes, it'll have part lot number.
Yeah. It might have
And then
other
it'll
numbers
have-
as well.
It'll also have become two titles. So the one
Yes.
title will become two.
Do they detail the lot numbers in the certificate of title?
Yes.
They do?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Usually up at the top, but quite often there's a map
And then the
as
map.
well, and that would have the numbers in. I'm not talking about the computerized ones
No,
now.
the old ones. I mean, used to
The
be
old
talking about
ones.
sections, parts of sections and purchase and
Yes,
so on.
yeah, you're right. The top bit has section
Trains.
number. If you
They're all
can,
there on
yeah.
sales.
Yeah.
If
And
you
you
can,
can
yeah,
go
yeah.
into the, yes, you can go into the records office. Guess what? They'll just put you on it into the same website.
But yeah,
So
that's
you
really
Try
good
and
point.
learn.
Yeah, sometimes you can't get there. There was one lady trying to find out where her grandmother lived, and all I can say is it's one of these two houses. There was two cottages around the same time. I didn't know which of the two. Were you going to? You had your hand up. Was that
That was to do
yeah.
with the number.
Yeah,
The
thank you.
allotment number.
Thank you.
Right, thanks very much, Helen. I'll now pass over to Graham Tucker to give the vote of thanks. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you. I'm going to challenge you on something.
You can ask me about genetics.
I'm going to ask you, what makes you think you're not a historian? The way you presented this program this evening, I think that rules it statement, and I think you are. And unfortunately, you are a historian.
Unfortunately.
The amount of work that has gone into producing this presentation tonight is obviously amazing. But the other thing that's amazing is that the fact that you were obviously enjoying passing it on to us. So you must have enjoyed researching it as well. And I hope you had a very good team of people behind you, because there's been a lot of work go into researching this tonight. So on behalf of everyone here tonight, I'd like to thank you very much for making the presentation. And we have a little something hiding behind here. And you'll need about three people to help you carry that home. Thank you very much for what you've presented.